Hi, good morning. I am Dr.D.Sathya, Working Assistant Professor, Department of Chemistry, SNS College of Engineering. Today, we are going to talk about the next section of the instrumentation part of UV visible spectroscopy. So, this is a diagram of UV visible spectroscopic instrumental part. So, the diagram of the components, first the light source and wavelength selector, then sample holder, detector. Finally, we got the result. So now we'll see about the detailed schematic diagram of UV visible spectrophotometer. A diagram of the components of typical spectrophotometer are shown here. A beam of light from visible or UV light source is separated into two components, the wavelength by diffracting grating. Each monochromatic beam is split into two equal intensity beams by half mirror device. One beam is the sample beam. That means colored magenta passes through the small transparent container cuvette containing a solution of the component being studied in a transparent solvent. So the other beam is a reference. So the passes through the identical cuvette containing only the solvent. So in the two cuvette is used, one is the sample and other one is the reference. The reference cuvette is containing the solvent. So the intensities of these light beams are measured by electronic detector and compared. So the intensity of the reference beam, we should have suffered the little or no light absorption. So this is defined as I naught. So the intensity of the sample beam is defined as I. Over the short period of the time, the spectrophotometer is automatically scans all the component of the wavelength in manner described here. The ultraviolet region is scanned by normally 200 to 400 and the visible portion is from 400 to 800. So this is a schematic diagram of cuvette based UV visible spectroscopic system. So the light source are used, two lamp is used here. So we'll discuss one by one. So here the main components of UV visible spectrophotometer are light source, wavelength selector, sample container and detector. So in the light source is the essential for emitting light in a wide range of wavelength to work in the UV visible spectrometer. Commonly a high intensity light source used for both UV and visible ranges in xenon lamp. Into the tungsten and halogen lamps is the less stable, more costly. So the two lamps for this instrument are the deuterium lamp for UV light and the halogen or tungsten lamp for visible light as the source of light. So the two lamps provided for good intensity. While measuring the intensity of light, the spectrophotometer is to switch. So smoother transition is possible when the switch cover occurs between the 300 to 350 nanometer, because the light emission of both UV visible or visible region sources is the same amount of the light that the wavelength. The next one, it's wavelength selector. In order to allow the sample examination using the wavelengths that the light source emits, the wavelength selector to help the certain wavelength to appropriate for the type of analyte the sample. The commonly used wavelength selector in UV visible is monochromator. So it separate the light into narrow banded of wavelength. So from the entrance slit, the radiation of different wavelengths will be enter into monochromator. At the particular angle, the beam will be collide and strike the dispersing element. The monochromator contains the prism that separates all the different wavelength of the light in a single beam. It bends the monochromatic light and produces nonlinear dispersion. Only a single radiation or color of specific wavelength will allow it to leave the monochromator and pass through the ultimate chain or exit slit. Sample container is the reference detector used to adjust the lamp brightness fluctuation of each measurement. After collecting the samples, the sample detector is measured the sample position and detected by some sample spectrum. It contains both the reference chamber and the sample chamber. The sample is kept for flat or transparent container. It's called a cuvette. or sample chamber. The solvent in which the sample dissolves in kept in the reference chamber, also known as the blank solution. So the sample cell choice depends on the path length, shape and size, and transmission characteristics. It's a desired wavelength and relative expense. So in UV or visible region, fused silica or quartz or cuvette is commonly used. So the detector is the main component in the UV visible spectrophotometer. So the detector is really the photoelectric coating and semiconductors. It converts the incoming light from the sample into the electric signal or current. So the higher the current, the greater the intensity. It has the properties of low noise and high sensitivity. So it gives a linear response. So each detector has a variety of wavelength ranges from different sensitivity. So finally the data recorder usually flat of the absorbance and against wavelength in the UV and visible section of the electromagnetic the spectrum. So thank you to one and all.